Hi class, and welcome to How to Write a Historic ID. Now, I'm just going to go through some very basic principles here. Now, if you've taken my class before, you probably don't need to listen to this because the historic ID has not changed. However, if this is the first time you've taken this class, you will need to know how to write a historic ID before your next quiz, and your quiz is already up on Canvas. It is due by April 5th, Sunday. So you want to make sure that you review this. Let's begin with the definition. So a historic ID is a term that's used to describe a description of a person or an event in history. It is a written description. And it is usually about a paragraph long. Sometimes you can do it quickly, sometimes it needs to be longer. So anywhere between 5 to 10 sentences in length. When you write a historic ID, you want to be as detailed as possible. So these are the things that you will be writing on your quizzes and exams that you're going to want to know the most about. So when you think about it, think about the key terms. When I put up a study guide for the exam, I will be giving you a list of key terms that could be possible IDs on your exam. And so you want to make sure that you know a little bit more about those particular key terms. So you're going to want to be more familiar with those key terms, know a little bit more detail. But basically the definition: a written description, very succinct and accurate summary of an event or a person in history. Sometimes it's also like a law. Okay, so the technique that I use to grade IDs and that you should be aware of is a 5-point technique. And this is called the 5 W's. 5 W's. W's. I'm going to use my little handy pen. 5 W's. Ooh, look at that W. Okay, the 5 W's. So the first is the what. So this is simply the definition of your topic. So you want to know what your topic is. You can usually define your topic in one sentence, right? So, and sometimes it's very simple. So for example, let me say, if I wrote on your exam, write an ID on the Freedmen's Bureau, then you would start your ID by saying, the Freedmen's Bureau is a federal agency that was created in 1865. So that sentence actually satisfies 2 of the W's. The what, which is the Freedmen's Bureau is a federal agency, and the when is when it was created, which is 1865. And if you really wanted to get fancy with that example, you would say 1865 to 1870, that it existed from 1865 to 1870. Okay, moving on to the who. So who are the significant people associated with this event? So in this case, we're talking about the Abraham Lincoln administration. So the President Lincoln administration created this federal agency where this federal agency was set up in the southern states, in the former Confederate states after the war. And the why, again, staying with our example of the Freedmen's Bureau, why is it important, right? This agency provided much needed assistance to freed people who were transitioning from slavery to a life of freedom, providing services such as education, housing, employment contracts, healthcare, etc. So you want to make sure that when you are writing an ID that you are checking off all 5 of these aspects of it. So you want to know a lot of detail about your key term when you're writing an ID. So here is an example of what an ID might look like. So here I'm using the example of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, okay? And so this is a law. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act is a law passed by Congress. That's who in 1854. That's when. It repeals that Missouri Compromise. That's a typo. It should say the Missouri Compromise. Let's fix that typo. The Missouri Compromise, and allows the issue of slavery to be decided by popular sovereignty. This is basically the vote of the people in the territories of Kansas and Nebraska, what and where. Okay, so it allows the issue of slavery to be decided by popular sovereignty. That's the what. In the territories of Kansas and Nebraska, that is the where. It is important because it starts a series of violent conflicts between slavery and pro-slavery groups in Kansas, which contributes to the tensions leading up to the Civil War. So this is the why it's important. So that's an example of a historic ID for an event or a law. Now we're going to look at an example of a historic ID for a person, which is actually a different kind of way of writing an ID, because obviously the person is the who, right? So Andrew Johnson is who we're talking about, was a Southern Democrat, so we're associating him with his, not just his political party, but where he was from, the South, and the 17th President of the United States. Johnson was Lincoln's vice president, and he became president after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in 1865 and remained president until 1869. So what was he president and when? Those are the years of his presidency. He is important because he instigated a major political debate over how to reconstruct the South after the Civil War. So there's one why he's important. And the second one is equally as important. He wanted reconciliation with the South and no civil rights for freedmen, while the radical Republicans in Congress wanted to restrict the political power of former Confederates and secure access to rights, including the right to vote to all freedmen. So we get from this paragraph that he's a controversial figure. We know that he was a president. We know that he became president after Abraham Lincoln, and that he instigated this major political debate during the time of his presidency. So that's sort of how you would do it for, if you're writing an ID on a person, you want to really understand why that person is significant and then place them within that context while you're writing the ID. And that's it. If you have any questions about how to write an ID, please either come and see me during Zoom office hours, or send me an email, or post on the discussion board. Thanks. Have a good day.